Jonny Dollar.
This is Barry Winters at Masters Insurance and Trust.
Hi, Barry. It's been years.
Sure, Johnny. Because we don't usually have trouble with our accounts.
You mean you didn't?
Huh?
Until now.
Well, yeah. I'm afraid that's about the size of it. And this time it's bad trouble.
Tell me all.
Simplex Tackle Company, Johnny. Over in Danbury.
Fishing tackle?
That's right.
Now, how come I never heard of them?
Well, they're a small outfit. A kind of glorified partnership.
What's that mean?
It's owned by 9 men. One of them, Hanley Thomas, is president. The other's a secretary, treasurer, and a flock of vice presidents.
So what's happened?
The 9 of them, plus the 20 or 30 workers at the plant, are all covered by a group life insurance deal. And listen.
Yeah?
We've just had to pay off on 3 policies in a row.
Oh, well, that's too bad. But why call on me?
Because, Johnny,
What?
those 3 deaths were all murders.
The transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Jonny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Jonny Dollar to the Masters Insurance and Trust Company, Home Office, Hartford, Connecticut. Following is an account of expenses incurred during my investigation of the ugly pattern matter. Expense account item 1, $1 even, taxi to Barry Winters' office at Masters, where I hoped he would give me something more to work on than he had over the phone. And you know something? As it turned out, he gave me a lot more than he thought he did.
The police? Sure, they've been working on these murders, Johnny, but they haven't come up with anything. Except the theory that one man is behind them all.
Why, Barry?
Because ordinarily there aren't enough killings in Danbury to shake a stick at. Because the victims have all been members of the Simplex Tackle Company.
Well, but...
Because they all occurred within a month. Because each of them occurred on a Wednesday.
Pattern, huh?
That's right. And also, Johnny, because there's no apparent reason for any of them.
Have the police found anything?
Nothing.
Same kind of weapon used in each case?
No. The first was a VP named Adams, run over by a car.
Sure it wasn't an accident?
The police say no. The second, John Bowers, was strangled, and Frank Davers was shot in his own home.
No pattern there. I mean in the way they occurred.
Apparently not. But Hanley Thomas and the police don't agree.
Thomas is president of Simplex, you said.
And a real financial wizard. He used to be a promoter. Not much ethics, but a sharp businessman. As a friend or partner, I imagine he's a fine man. Here, I'll give you a complete list of the officers of the company, their ranks and their salaries.
Well, I don't know exactly what good that'll...
Here you are. And this is a list of the employees.
Have those employees all been checked out?
Sergeant Dennis, over there at Homicide, he made quite a point of it. So did Mr. Thomas.
Why don't I run over there and talk with him? And to the Danbury police?
I think you'd better. And the sooner the better.
Why do you say that?
The pattern, Johnny. There are still 6 officers left in that company. Still alive.
Item 2, another $1 for a cab back to my apartment. There I picked up my own car, and from here on in the charge will be for mileage on it. Except for item 3, $4.25 for a tank of mobile gas. It was almost noon by the time I covered the 60-odd miles to the Simplex factory on the far end of Danbury. To my surprise, it was quite a plant, new and modern in every way. A receptionist took my card, and a few minutes later, I was ushered into the office of Hanley Thomas, president. This is a terrible thing. Adams, Bowers, Frank Davers, all within a few weeks. Barry Winters back in Hartford seemed to think these murders have all been the work of one man. The police and I concur in that theory. There's been a sort of pattern followed by the crazy killer. But not an actual method, Mr. Thomas. No, I'll grant you that. True, the car accident, strangling, pistol shot, but they were done by someone who must have been very familiar with his victims. How do you mean? Someone who knew, for instance, that Ben Adams took a long walk each night, knew the route he took. Same thing applied to the second victim? John Bowers always drove to work through a little woods. It was there he was stopped and strangled. Frank Davers always stayed at home alone on Wednesday nights, while his wife was out playing bridge. Someone broke in on him? Have the police checked that? It was someone he must have let in. In other words, someone he knew. I understand you've checked all of your employees. Yes, right off the bat. As much as the police could. Any particular reason to suspect one of them? Only because they were all in position to know these men pretty well, even know their habits. We're a small company, Mr. Dollar. Our employees, including the girls in the office, only number 21. That was your only reason to think that one of them may have done it? Oh, we've had our share of labor troubles, a few dissidents in the ranks, so to speak. I suppose some of them resent the rather top-heavy management here. You mean the fact that there are 9 executives to only 21 employees? 9 executives to take the profits they work for? Yes. And I must confess the profits have been pretty good lately. Barry Winters gave me a list of, here it is. Now, according to this... What is it, Mr. Dollar? I got thinking on the way over here. Yes? Part of the pattern you mentioned. The 3 men were killed in alphabetical order. What? Why, yes. Adams, Bowers, Davers. But now that I look at this list again... Of course, the pattern again. No, I think that was just a coincidence. The pattern, if there is one, is based on their order of rank. That is, if these salary figures mean anything. I'm not sure I understand. First was Adams, at the lowest salary among you officers. Well, yes, Adams received $12,000 a year. Look. Bowers came in next at $13,500. You're right. And Frank Davers earned $15,000. So, if this pattern should continue, you mean to say you think there might be more of these murders? If this pattern continues, the next to go would be... But good heavens, man! Would be James Williams or Charles Hart, both earning $16,500. Then a couple of more, then you. Mr. Dollar! Where is he, this James Williams, Mr. Thomas? Williams is on vacation. A little place not far from here. Parvin's Pond. When did he leave? Last week. On Monday. Have you heard from him? No, I haven't. But Mr. Dollar... Of course, if the alphabetical pattern is the right theory... Excuse me. Yes?
Sergeant Dennis, Mr. Thomas.
It's Sergeant Dennis of Homicide, Mr. Dollar. So I hear. I'll hold the phone so you can...
Mr. Thomas?
Yes, Sergeant.
I'm afraid I have some bad news for you.
Oh?
Another one of your partners.
Williams.
Mr. John Williams.
Yes?
Discovered his body over at Parvin's Pond this morning. He's been murdered.
Good Lord. Another of the executives of the Simplex Tackle Company murdered, bludgeoned to death in his little vacation cabin on Parvin's Pond, some 40 miles north of Danbury. And again, it was according to pattern.
How those carefree kids can fish and water ski out there when there's a murder right under their noses.
Yeah, Sergeant, I know what you mean. This cabin Mr. Williams was using?
Yes, sir. He came up here on his vacation Monday morning, last week, alone. There you are.
Who knew he was coming to this particular spot, Sergeant?
Why, everybody down at the plant, I guess. And now the way the doc and I figured it out, Mr. Williams had just come in from fishing. You see there? And he just tossed his rod and stringer on the bed.
Everything's just the way it was, huh?
Except for the body. That's in Danbury at the coroner's.
You said he was bludgeoned to death.
With that oar from his rowboat. See it? Lying there on the floor?
Yeah, I see it. Who found the body?
Little old lady from the cabin next door. She stopped by this morning to bring him some cookies. Knocked on the door swung open, and there he was. And the doc says the body was lying there ever since.
Have you checked the oar for prints?
No prints on it but Mr. Williams. Killer must have used gloves.
What about footprints?
If there were any, the vacationers, hereabouts, tramped them out long before we got here. Now, the way we figure it is that he came in here Wednesday night off the lake.
Wednesday?
Yes, Mr. Dollar. Just like the other ones. It happened on a Wednesday, a week ago tomorrow.
Pattern again?
Yes, sir. And if you ask me, it's the pattern of a madman. And this being a Tuesday again...
But what possible motive could there be for it?
You ask me? It's one of the employees there at the plant. And Mr. Thomas, he's the president.
Yeah, I know. He agrees with you.
After all, for such a small company, 9 big money-making officers? At least there was 9.
I know what you mean. And those 21 employees paid pretty well?
No, in spite of the company making a lot of money. What with this recession we're in...
Read the signs, man. Most of this so-called recession is a lot of bunk.
And I agree with you. Everybody get out and dig instead of sitting around hoarding their money. But what I was going to say is that, those executives took advantage and held down wages in spite of all the money they were making. So just let one crazy hothead find out how good they're doing.
How well have you checked those employees?
As best we could. I talked with every one of them myself.
How about the officers of the company?
There's not one of them that would do a thing like this. They're all fine men. Ask Mr. Thomas. Sure, they're hard-headed businessmen, everyone looking out for himself. But they're all fine men, and they're all making plenty of money.
Which reminds me.
Huh? And what's that, Mr. Dollar?
A list of the officers and their salaries. And according to this, if there's another victim.
Another? Oh, no.
I've worked out another step in the pattern of these murders, based on the earnings of these men.
But then, Mr. Dollar, who will it be?
It won't be anybody if I can help it. But, Sergeant, I may have to ask you to put in a 24-hour watch over an officer of that company named Charles F. Hart. I didn't bother explaining my own idea of the pattern to Sergeant Dennis. After all, my theory could be wrong, but I drove back to the Simplex factory, to the office of Charles Hart. I found only his secretary there.
No, he isn't here, Mr. Dollar.
Well, where is he?
To be perfectly honest about it, I don't know.
Hasn't he been here all day today?
No, sir. He hasn't been in since last Wednesday.
Look, miss, have you called his home, his wife?
He's a bachelor, Mr. Dollar, and lives in a little apartment in Danbury.
Have you tried to call him?
Well, no, sir. You see...
Does Mr. Thomas know about his not being here?
There's nothing unusual about Charlie's leaving without telling us, Mr. Dollar.
Mr. Thomas?
He often goes off on sales trips like this.
He was last seen the day Mr. Williams was killed.
Well, surely you don't think Charlie Hart had anything to do with Jim Williams being... Did you find out anything over at Parsons Pond?
Not much, I'm afraid. Could this Charlie Hart have any reason for wanting Williams out of the organization? And Adams, and Bowers, and Davers?
Of course not.
Yes, he could.
What?
Miss Gregg.
What do you mean by that?
Mr. Hart was the one who built up this company, the one who developed the products, put all his money in it.
Now, just a minute.
He's the one who sold all the product that made all the money. He and Mr. Adams were the ones who started the business.
Is that true, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, of course.
Then, when Mr. Thomas and his relatives came along...
Miss Gregg, what she says is true, Mr. Dollar.
Charlie Hart and Ben Adams did start this company. They took on a couple of partners, Al Bowers and Frank Davers. They were the ones who decided on the expansion program, who came to us for the financing.
With the others gone, it should have been Mr. Hart's company.
Wait, Miss Gregg, our financing made this present operation possible. But to imply that Charlie could have been driven by jealousy or any other motive to commit these crimes, that's absurd. How could you suggest such a thing, Miss Gregg?
I didn't say he did it. I only tried to.
We know what you said, and you've said enough. Tell me one more thing, Mr. Thomas. Yes? What happens to his share of the business when one of the partners dies? Or in this case, when he's murdered? Why, the other partners absorb his share. Then if Charlie Hart eliminated one of you, it could add to his holdings. That's true. Okay, I'll see you later. But, Mr. Dollar, if you believe for one moment that Charlie Hart... Why, I've known him for years. Yeah? Well, I think I want to know him a little better. It was pretty plain that Charlie Hart, supposedly the next on the list of victims, had plenty of motive for eliminating some of his partners in the Simplex Tackle Company. I guess the same applied to any other member of the company. But he, having started the business, knew all about the others, their plans, their habits, and he'd last been seen just prior to the murder of James Williams. I got his address, hopped in my car, and drove into Danbury. But ringing his bell and pounding on his door got me nothing.
Here, young man. You want Mr. Hart, you'll probably find him at the factory.
Are you the building superintendent?
That's right.
Then I want you to let me into Mr. Hart's apartment.
Well, now, just a minute.
Here, my credentials. I'm an insurance investigator.
Investigator?
Here, see?
Jonny Dollar special.
And if that isn't enough, here's a 5 spot for your trouble. 10?
Well, but now don't you let on that I...
Okay, thanks. The same list.
A list of the officers.
Huh?
The officers of our company.
Mr. Hart.
That's right. Charlie Hart. You should have looked behind the door when you barged in here.
Look, would you like to point that thing the other way?
I'm sorry, Mr. Dollar. Of course.
You know who I am.
I heard you through the door.
Is that the gun that killed one of your partners?
They killed one of my... No. Tomorrow is another Wednesday. Wednesday, Mr. Dollar.
I know.
And look at that list you're holding. I finally realized the progression in which these murders are happening.
Oh?
On the basis of our salaries at the company. Adams, Bowers, Davers, and then Williams or me.
You've circled Williams' name.
Yes, because he got it last week. That's why I'm staying here locked in. Because tomorrow, if the killer strikes again, the crazy maniac killer...
Maybe. Or maybe that's what he'd like everybody to think. That he's a madman instead of a... Charlie. A couple of questions.
Anything. If I can help you stop this.
That company was once yours.
Well, that's right.
You were the boss, the head man. Until Hanley Thomas came along.
Yes, Hanley and his brothers and his brother-in-law.
And they took over as first in rank.
Well, they were entitled to, Mr. Dollar.
What?
Well, it was their money made the company what it is. I'm not an administrator, a man who knows and plays all the angles. I'm just a worker and a salesman.
You mean you're content with the present setup?
Well, yes, of course. In spite of the prodding of a sweet old secretary who thinks I...
Wait a minute.
But these murders, Mr. Dollar...
You stay put. Keep that gun, and don't move out of this apartment until I tell you to, no matter who comes to the door. To save your life.
You think you know who's...
Charlie, it's been right under my nose. The obvious. Almost too obvious.
Why, Mr. Dollar, I didn't expect you back so. Why, well, what do those handcuffs mean?
They mean arrest for the murder of your partners.
That's a very bad joke.
You and your brothers and brother-in-law. The whole company yours. Once you got rid of the men who started it all, who made it possible for your capital to make it pay off. But tell me, were you going to kill off your relatives too? One by one?
This is the most absurd thing
You covered your tracks pretty well. Perfect crimes. Except for that ore you used to kill Williams. Fingerprints, as big as life. All over it.
Impossible.
I figured the gloves you wore must have had holes in them, or been worn very thin.
What?
That you just didn't notice in the excitement of the moment. And when I finally found those gloves...
You've been out to my house, ransacking my home.
And when your wife confessed that you weren't at home at the time of any of the murders...
That's a lie. She helped me plan the whole thing.
Oh, then you admit the murders.
Yes, and now that you know, and you haven't had time to tell anyone, there's no one about to hear the shot, Mr. Dollar.
Oh, now look.
No, but I heard a real clean confession, Mr. Thomas.
Sergeant, No. That was just to protect myself from this...
I'm afraid that kind of talk is a little late.
Oh, no, it isn't.
Look out! Sergeant, I haven't seen that fast a draw except on television.
Oh, didn't you know, Johnny? I was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
There'll still be a lot for the courts to work on about who else was involved with Thomas. The sergeant's bullet killed him, by the way. And I'd call it good riddance, or at least quick justice. But the legal end of things is outside my bailiwick. So, expense account total, including a lot of mileage on my car, $101 even. Remarks? Why bother? Yours truly, Jonny Dollar. Truly Jonny Dollar in The Ugly Pattern Matter on the Joe Bev Show. I'm Joe Bev. Next time on the Joe Bev Show, an Uncle Dunkle fable, Penny and Gwinny, Chapter 1 of a double-barrel detective story by Mark Twain, and yours truly Jonny Dollar in The Walter Patterson Matter. That's next time on the Joe Bev Show. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you can't get enough Joe Bev, well, just go to Amazon.com and search.